Chapter 1. Worlds Crashing. Thaden chased Kora into the old growth of the firs, pristine air filling his lungs, dappled light half-blinding his eyes. A saccharine startled and took flight, plumage blood-red against sky blue. They ran farther than on typical days. A bad idea, Thaden knew, but he didn't want to show up gutless. Besides, Kora had a weakness for all things trouble. As for his weakness, well, some things were just obvious. Deep in the woods, the sun was sinking below the mountain, and their homing beacons were flickering at the edge of their usable range, when a shrill mewling, almost like a human child's cry, broke the stillness. Their gazes locked, calculating grey eyes met curious hazel, and a brief contest of wills ensued. "We can't, Kora," Thaden said, swallowing. "I promised my father I wouldn't go so far that my beacon died. Besides, the horn is about to blow.
But someone needs help.
If we go much farther, we'll need help, Kora." She was already running toward the sound, into the deepening gloom. Her beacon lay on the ground. He glanced at his own beacon and saw it grey and still. The shrill cry rang out again, but Thaden's call for Kora died in his throat. Something whistled in his ear, followed by a thwip like an arrow lodging deep into its target. Something moved. In the near distance, a woman staggered over the ground. Wine-red liquid dripped from her mouth, and she wore a badge on her collar. Thaden squinted. Is that a sovereign symbol? Is she royal? The woman stumbled over the brush, opening her mouth, trying to form words.
My son.
Anything else, and Thaden might not have lost his grip.
My son.
Any other words, and he could have. His head throbbed with a flood of adrenaline, and he closed his eyes against his final memory of his mother. The cold clutch of her fingers gripping his as she pressed a brass emblem into his palm.
Take it and run!
Then the awful scream from the window, and his breathless escape to the shelter of Wildthorne Forest. But Wildthorne Forest offered no shelter now. Thaden's knees buckled, and he crouched behind a thin fir as the hunter tramped, boot-heavy through the brush. A Keenan otherworlder. Thaden saw his ruddy face and black eyes, but this time he stayed hidden. This time he didn't run. Groaning, the Keenan heaved his victim up over a massive shoulder, and as he turned, Thaden saw it, a flash of sunlight against a curious brass emblem dangling from the otherworlder's throat. How did he have that? The Keenan bore the woman deep into the old growth, and after a brief lull, the crying resumed, and Kora burst from behind a scrub oak and found a tiny cub at the roots of a fir tree, caught in a trap and unable to free its right forepaw. She reached for her knife.
Come on, Thad. Help me.
Bending down, Thaden offered Kora his two strong hands, though now they were pale and bloodless. Somehow he wrestled the jaws of the iron trap open. The cub pulled free as the spring released, closing with a powerful snap. Kora caught the cub up in her arms and grinned. Folk from the outer reaches hailed it good luck to free creatures from any form of bondage, but this cub was not so simple. He was a Lynnix, neither human nor animal. Lynnix were shapeshifters, gate-travelling gods, comfortable in both feline or human form. Few Lynnix lived on the Blue World. This one could have travelled through an interworld gate, though Thaden wasn't sure how or where. There was no stable world gate nearby, though there were always unstable gates. These closures could fail and swallow unsuspecting travellers without warning. Beacons offered a level of protection and some traceability, though little more. In the outer reaches, the expectation of safety was like any other myth. "The warning horn sounded ages ago. We have to go, now!" Thaden broke into a run. Kora hugged the creature to her chest, and they never paused, the entire distance to the edge of the forest. The sun had sunk below the horizon, and it was past dark before they reached Kora's cottage. The horn had not ceased to blow all night. One of the search party cried out aloud when he spotted them.
Oi, they're alive!
When the party saw the Lynnix wrapped in Kora's arms, they gathered around, whispering, grasping for just a touch of that soft grey coat and whatever luck would rub off. Thaden stood apart, pensive. There was no keeping the Lynnix, but what could they do with him? They'd saved his life. That was a commitment, physical and political. Besides, what they'd witnessed was no mere murder. It was an assassination, most likely political. Who was this Lynnix? Almost certainly, it would inherit a title. He and Kora would have to report the Keenan. And what about that brass emblem around the Keenan's neck? How much could he say about it? Thaden exhaled a breath, low and heavy. However he weighed these things in his mind, he couldn't trust them.